Hey, so my name is Jeremy Ghosten. I'm a senior network architect at IVOXY Consulting, and what does IVOXY do? We're the data availability people. We do network, server infrastructure, and using computing and security, and among other things. And I want to introduce our Arctic Wolf engineers. We have Gary Quinn and Brian Knopp. And here's why we like Arctic Wolf for our customers. IVOXY sought out Arctic Wolf because we like their solution. We have quite a few customers that have already, we've done deployments for Arctic Wolf, anywhere from seafood companies to accounting. What the main thing that we really like to see is we feel like our customers get their weekends back. It's one of those things where you get something funky happens over the weekend, and all of a sudden, you're getting a phone call. Everyone goes into this panic mode. Well, with the Arctic Wolf solution, you have a team that's dedicated to checking the stuff out for you. And if you deploy things correctly and you have everything laid out, you get your weekend back. They call you with the problem and you just tell them to stop it. And then you can investigate it in your own time. And that's one of the big things that I really feel like our customers really resonate with. You also get the added side benefits of compliance, and then it also helps you with your cybersecurity insurance. But one of my main things is that trying to hire cybersecurity experts is really tough right now. And in this case, you get the cybersecurity expert, but you don't have to pay the benefits and everything else that comes along with having a personnel around. But then it's also, these guys come to you with, hey, this is your problems that we're seeing right now, but they also come to you with the solutions. So it's not just a problem that you need to figure out. They already have a team working with you to help solve the problem, rather than you just being out there in the wind trying to figure it out yourself. And so with Arctic Wolf deployments, here's how IVOXY can help. So there's several different ways that you can deploy Arctic Wolf. You can do it inline, you can do it off a span port on your network, and then you're still going to install an agent on a bunch of different machines. And how we can help is we can help you put this inline into your network if you want to, or we can help you get the clients installed. We can help you set up the span ports. We can help you start pointing all your firewall logs and everything else to the Arctic Wolf appliances. And so that's how we like to help. And it also gives us a chance to really look at your network and find out where things need to fit. So that's how IVOXY can help. So I wanted to go ahead and hand it over to Gary and Brian, and they're going to tell you and go into a deeper dive on what the application does and what they do. So I'll hand it over to you guys.
Thanks, Jeremy, and thank you to IVOXY. We're really delighted to practice our webinar skills. We're not professional webinar presenters, but we're just a couple of guys that are really passionate about security, and we work for a company that's equally passionate about keeping our customers safe. Just to set the table there, Brian and I were both in the Western Washington area. I live in Issaquah. He lives in downtown Seattle. We cover the Pacific Northwest, but also on the call we have our Oregon representation. So some of you are coming in from the Oregon side. We've got you covered that way. Just so you know that we're local, we have local leadership, and we've been in the area for quite some time, and we're available if you wanted to, if you ever wanted to chat in person or wanted to learn more. We do a lot of fun things, and IVOXY helps us with that. Brian, do you want to say anything before we get going?
No, just yes, thank you also to IVOXY as well for hosting us, and we're really looking forward to chatting with everyone today. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, not to put you on the spot, Brian, but congratulations again about your promotion to principal sales engineer.
Yes,
totally worth it. So we're very fortunate to have him in the market and on this call. So I just wanted to say I'm very appreciative that Brian's here, because he was probably my mentor when I joined Arctic Wolf about 2 years ago. And he's one of those old timers that's takes over 5 years. Have you now, Brian?
Almost 4. Yeah.
Almost 4. Okay. It just seems like 5 in internet time. So our mission statement is to end cybersecurity risk. And what does that mean? It means that we want to take the likelihood or the impact of a risk happening to our customers down to manageable, tolerable levels. You can't ever get rid of all risk. And the nature of warfare is that the threats are always changing and adapting. So we have to roll with those punches and change and adapt too. But if we can keep our risk down to appreciable levels, then it's no longer earth shattering if it occurs to our businesses. So that's our mission. It's more than just a fun, pithy saying. It's something that we live by. So everything that we do at Arctic Wolf, internally or from a product or a service that we produce, it goes to that goal. It has to be able to reduce the likelihood or reduce the impact, or ideally both, before it's considered. So that's what our mantra is and what we live by. But we're going to be a little bit different from what you're used to from other messages or other vendors or other stories. All right, so to set the table, cybersecurity has an effect in this problem. We're spending more and more, and the hole and the gaps are just getting bigger and bigger. A big part of this is the nature of compute has been changing, and it continues to change with work from home, whether it's cloud, whether it's on-prem, wherever the data is. Everything's up for grabs. And there's a lot of vendors in this space, and there's a lot of spend, but more and more the damage is getting more and more costly. The figure here, 944 million, that's the US figure. Now, worldwide, it's a little cheaper, but since we're pretty much all American based here, I thought I would use the American figure that I got from the IBM cost of a data breach report. They do one every single year. Totally recommend it. I reference it a few times in this webinar, in this deck, just to kind of show, well, what is it that we're trying to solve for? And what we're trying to solve for is to keep this figure as low as possible. And this figure also does not take into account ransomware payments. It's completely separate thing. So the 944 is the loss of productivity, the downtime, the restoration services, the legal aspects, the maybe potential court cases, always the lawsuits come ramping in when this happens. So the average cost that's what they're tracking for from IBM. So what does this mean for us? It has to make business sense before a customer will come and talk to us. These are the common challenges that a customer will bring to us. And whenever I'm talking to a customer, and I'm sorry that we can't really do that face to face from this perspective, you guys are kind of bubbled off as attendees instead of getting nice feedback. But whenever I talk to customers upfront and in person, I always try to dig into why it is that what they have now is not working. Because when they come to us, they've come to the conclusion that tools alone were not enough to solve the problem. If it were, it would be solved by now, and it just isn't. So we try to shift our customers into thinking into a different mindset, and instead of doing a gap analysis for a missing tool and filling that with some product from vendor X, they think about it holistically as a full ecosystem and how everything is interconnected and should be leveraged as such into a cohesive strategy. So everything kind of makes sense from this standpoint. Malicious activity, a lot of budgets get freed up if there's some near miss or dead on attack in an environment, and they're just dusting themselves off and getting themselves back to steady state. Ransomware has been with us, what, 5 years, 6 years at this point. It's pretty much now assumed that if you don't have good recovery story and strategy and rapid response, then chances are good your company is just going to go out of business. We've come to that point now that if we don't have something relying to get us back on our feet, maybe it makes sense just to go out of business. That is a response action. That is a strategy. It's not particularly a great one, but unfortunately, it's what a lot of people are relying on. They're relying on just hoping their way out of the problem. I like the compliance one because we help customers so much in achieving the compliance regulations. If it's a government enforced one like HIPAA, like PCI, or if it's just a security architectural framework that they're trying to align to, maybe for cyber insurance premium reasons, NIST framework, ISO, CMMC, the CIS controls. CMMC I'd probably put back in the government one. But whenever someone is considering if they should change from the way they've been doing things, they usually take into account one of three things. The first is, does this make me money? Does this save me money? Or does this reduce risk somewhere in the environment? Reducing risk, that's completely our wheelhouse, even though sometimes it's kind of hard to quantify going into it. But we can also make money, and we can also lower costs. And compliance is a big reason why that is. If you have some new market vertical that you're trying to enter into, or some new partnership that you're trying to get into, a lot of those will dictate basic security foundational hygiene before they'll interact, just because the supply chain is if not the predominant, risk factor that the large interconnected economy is functioning in, it's up there. So it's not just enough that we are doing everything that we can internally. We got to make sure the partners that we trade information with or do business with are also doing that. Because like I said earlier, trust is the root of all compromise. And unfortunately, you have to trust the people that you do business with to some degree. But compliance is a good reason to show that you're making those good faith design decisions and choices to keep their best interests at heart. Getting into the tool side, SIMs. So the SIM is kind of a philosophical question or topic, but what's pretty obvious is that people aren't getting the benefits out of their SIM investments that they've been making over the last 10 years, 15 years. It was trendy for a long time because tech is kind of trendy for people to go and get a SIM. Maybe they were looking to meet those PCI requirements, or they were looking to align with the NIST architectural framework. But what they found is SIM as a tool is great, but it requires lots of expertise to be able to wield. It takes a lot of expensive FTE, hours and time to invest into a tool. It's not just a magic machine where it spits out the answer and everything can be worked from there. No, you have to dig in. You have to put in those dashboard widgets. You have to do personalized queries. You have to nail in the alerts that you want. And oh, by the way, if you get it all nailed out like you wanted, now you don't have people to be able to watch it maybe 24/7. Maybe people need to go on vacation, or maybe they just leave the company. Business continuity is a big reason why Arctic Wolf or any kind of service exists, because we want to be there if there's turnover, however it happens. Usually it's for happy reasons, right? The security professional that has a proclivity for a specific SIM vendor came in, loaded it out the way he wanted it, but then he got bored. Maybe he got everything he wanted, and he maybe got a new certification or is wanting one. But then he went off to some larger organization, whether it's Microsoft, Amazon, Adobe, you name it, in this world. Even though they're having lots of layoffs, I'm not sure that the security professionals are in that boat as to the same degree as everyone else. Then lastly, cyber insurance gaps. So this is a new construct, right? Cyber insurance gaps are really revealing themselves on premium renewal. People that got their policies earlier on, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, they're getting shell shocked by the premium. So when the surveys come in, you might as well just take the day to deal with this. It might even take a few days to answer their queries and the level of satisfaction that you know that they're going to hold you to. And the reason why is it was a new market. They got in, the insurers, that is, they got into it. They didn't realize what the real costs were going to be. And then they lost their shirts on it. And part of the reason is a lot of organizations has a defensive strategy, meaning that, oh, I don't need to invest in preventative measures or in-depth capabilities because I have cyber insurance. So if anything goes wrong, they're just going to pay me out. It's no problem. Well, problem now, because a lot of these renewals are coming up very expensive, especially for those that aren't doing the basic foundational security pieces in place. And part of that survey is uncovering that. Is there MFA access? Are you cloud native? Or do you do logging and retention? And do you have the people on staff that are able to operate those components? And even after all of that headache and hassle, you kind of get the feeling that they don't really want to be in this business. After you go through all that hassle, then they put in exclusions. They'll put in an exclusion that says, oh yeah, we'll cover you except for ransomware. If you get ransomware, you're kind of on your own that way. I saw a case, it was out of Ohio a couple of weeks ago, where a hospital was hit with ransomware and the payment wasn't even all that much. It was, I don't know, 40, 50 grand, something like that. So they go to their insurance carrier and they're like, pay us our 40 grand ransomware and we'll be good to go. And the insurer said, no, that's excluded. And the reason why they gave is, if you look at your policy, it says that we only cover loss of physical computer equipment. So if servers were damaged or if the drives were killed, then we pay you out. But loss of the data or encryption of the data doesn't fall within your policy. And the insurance, the healthcare hospital sued, but the court sided with the insurer because it's right there in black and white that someone didn't read, because they just figured insurance is the same. It's always the details that get you. So I will just leave you with this particular thought. If you're going to come to us, be thinking about what it is that you're trying to solve. Typically, it's going to be a business reason or a business justification. It's not just enough that, hey, we got cool whiz bang stuff. No, there needs to be deeper reasons why a customer will come to us. So let's get into it. If any of you have security operations experience in your past, or even kind of break fix, root cause analysis, you know it all comes down to telemetry. The telemetry that enterprise class gear will produce is written by a developer that may be cryptic and may be difficult to understand in there, but you know there's a whole lot of those messages. But it takes specialized algorithms or people to be able to dive in and quickly what the problem is. So for us at Arctic Wolf, we just start with telemetry. And the way it works is, just so we're clear, I'm not a SIM. I'm making a service. I take in all your telemetry and I produce the answers from that telemetry. So we save our customers from having to invest in spendy on-prem or even cloud native platforms, and then put in expensive personnel to be able to operate and execute on those logs. So I kind of liken it to the Wild West of what can be produced from an environment. And a lot of this should look familiar if you have any experience with SOCs or even NOCs, that it usually revolves around endpoint telemetry, network telemetry, cloud environments, identity, and the human angle. So I'm not going to really go through a whole lot of them, but I'll give a couple of short examples. The first is the endpoint. Since we're not a product company, I'm not really particularly interested in what endpoint that you provide that's going to produce the data for us to ingest. We're Switzerland. We will take in anyone's data, and we have native parsers that are built for the critical mass endpoint vendors. Typically, if it starts with a C, if it's CrowdStrike, if it's Silence, if it's Carbon Black, if it's Cisco AMP, if it has a C, and even if it doesn't, like Sentinel, and that kind of sounds like a C, right? Or Defender ATP, you name it, we have the bridges built to be able to take data out of their cloud and to run with it, to be able to say this is significant. I know Brian has stories about how the endpoint vendors, they say, hey, all you need is an endpoint and you're going to be secure. And of course, the network people, they disagree. They say, oh, no. You need to have network detection response. That's really where the key is. And the truth is, they're both right. You need both of them. But since they only have their particular swim lane, they're not really interested in what the other side of the fence is doing. So on the
don't ask what
side,
happens in cloud, right?
yeah, the cloud thing. Yeah, we're just going to pretend this doesn't exist, because the endpoint guys really don't want to have anything to do with third-party SaaS services or infrastructure as a service. Yeah, Brian's got great stories about how we find customers that their endpoint screamed bloody murder. So usually if it gets past the endpoint, it's related to one of three reasons. The first is endpoint maybe isn't deployed everywhere, or maybe the endpoint isn't configured correctly. Maybe their endpoint broke an application and then an engine was detuned or disabled. And the third is maybe it just missed it. Every time we come into an endpoint conversation, they will scream bloody murder right up until the time that the attacker disabled it and went about his objective after that point. So endpoints are great, but they are just one tool in the stack. Same thing for network. So the network people, they'll say, hey, just buy our great next gen firewall, and we'll see every single packet, and we'll judge it on its merits as it leaves the network. So others take a very niche approach. We'll just look at all your DNS queries. And the answer is they're all right. You need to be able to wield all of that. And it all folds up to layer 8. So it really needs people that's able to make that decision and quickly that this particular network signature that fired is applicable and relevant to this identity that clocked in that from Okta or Duo or Active Directory or Azure MFA. We get so much information from the identity stack that you wouldn't believe it. I don't know what the number is, but since business email compromise is so predominant on the rise, we get so much from our cloud and our identity vectors, which are really
and
clutch.
Gary, I'm on some of the emails. I'm on some of the emails for all the customers that they get, and it runs the gamut from endpoint hosts having issues to network issues to identity issues. I mean, you can see, hey, this guy's logging in from Russia. Is he supposed to be over there? Well, yeah, he's traveling, but yet you're getting alert on it to let you know about it. Right? It's great info all the time.
No,
Yeah, or
that's
another one
perfect.
that we'll
Thanks,
see
Jeremy.
is oh, sorry, Gary. Another one that we'll see is
No,
maybe they used a VPN. Maybe you've done some good hardening and you've tightened up your fence and people can't log in from Russia, only if they're in Oregon, for instance. So then someone uses a VPN connection into Oregon. So it looks like they're logging in from Oregon to get around that. And then
Yeah.
we'll see something like, oh, and now they have created an email or they've created a rule in their email inbox that deletes everything from IT or deletes everything from accounts payable. You're like, pretty suspicious. So yeah, it's pretty interesting where we get all of this telemetry from.
Yeah.
no, that's great stuff. And it just kind of shows that attacks, they can kind of be similar, but they're unique enough where it's kind of hard to get away from having the human element that's looking at it. But it's definitely the right approach to be able to plan for that happening. And people just don't. They're relying on the endpoint marketing or the network marketing to say, yes, just buy this one widget and everything will be great, instead of what comes after this, what comes when this fails, or what's our plan. And it's that planning aspect or the response action that people just don't take into account. And then lastly, I will leave with human. So the human signal intelligence is really great, and it speaks to the collaborative nature that Arctic Wolf does for our customers. So we'll get into the personnel people of it, but just know at this point, it's a concierge service, which means that it's not an algorithm that's producing a raw log. It's a person that thoughtfully creates tickets, is open for dialogue and conversation, and also works that through with the customer with recommended and collaborative guidance to be able to get it out. But it flows both ways. So on the human side, we want to be able to get signal from you and your users. We want to be able to attend your meetings. We want to be able to see what initiatives are in flight. We want to see if you're doing a DR test, or if you're going to expand in some other market, or you're evaluating a new tool, or if one of your laypersons at the front office was targeted for something and now they're coming to you wanting answers and you're coming to us. We want to be able to get that signal coming up from that stack. So I think that's a very unique differentiation for a true SOC versus a point play security product. So everything feeds up to the cloud. We're completely cloud native. That's our open XDR architecture. What we mean by that is we have these bridges and parsers that are built for all the telemetry from, it doesn't matter if it's network, endpoint, et cetera. We link into all of their stacks to be able to make some sense of what they're seeing. And then it has our own tooling that's involved in this. So we have our own endpoint capabilities. We have our own network capabilities that complement what the customer's existing stack already is and makes them better. So the concierge delivery model feeds up into one of several services that we offer. And anyone that's built a SOC from scratch usually has some sort of mission statement in mind. Okay, what services are we expecting of our SOC? How is it going to deliver it? And how is it going to go about doing that? Arctic Wolf started, I guess, 11 years ago. We're definitely past 10 at this point. And our bread and butter, before it even had a name, was managed detection and response. You can use that phrase interchangeably as SOC as a service. So we want to be able to provide that same organic representation of what it would be like if a customer were able to build a SOC in-house that can answer these questions before it becomes a problem. And in our bucket, we look at cloud. So that's a little different than classic on-prem for us. And the reason why is we're able to use the native security offerings and tools that come with Office 365 or come with Azure Infrastructure as a Service or AWS or GCP. They all have their quirks, their constraints, but they also have their own threat intelligence that they stitch into it. With suspicious risky IP addresses, suspicious flow data, we take in their telemetry, and we're the ones that judge if their user and behavioral analytics are accurate, and if it's something that a customer needs to be aware of in the form of a tool or a ticket or a report or a Zoom call. And then data exploration. I'm going to touch on this in a second. Customers wanted to have more direct access to the data that they were producing and sending to us. So we offer that up. It's not the same SIM experience like a Splunk, because we think that just hasn't served our customers well, because the care and feeding of that tool is really over encompass what the tool is supposed to be doing for the customer in return. But we do open it up so a customer can do their own raw log searches, that they can see some of the enrichments that we put into that data, just to kind of commingle who's flunking fail-ins, who's where the geo reputation for a specific artifact is in the data. We open that up, but what we're not doing is saying, okay, you're going to do your own threat hunting. It's generally not what the purpose of the tool is. It's only just if you wanted to get more information or perspective, the information is there for the customer to examine, but you're not going to find something in there that we haven't already done, because that kind of defeats the purpose of having a service versus a tool. So I'm going to go into SOC as a service and just kind of level set so everyone knows what a SOC really means. It's a department. It's its own living department, and whether it's built in-house or whether it's whether it's outsourced as a service, it should have multiple moving parts underneath it. The only tool-based one here is going to be a SIM, and that's basically just the analog to centralized log collection. That's all that is. There should be some threat intelligence that's stitched in, and maybe there's some machine learning that happens at this layer. But generally, that's only one piece of what a SOC is. And for everyone that's listening, you have a SOC, even if it's not something that's formally defined. When something goes wrong, everyone turns their attention to someone, whether it's someone on staff, whether it's a few someone's. Everyone looks for answers, and everyone will look for the most likely person that has it. Now, if that person that's getting looked at looks at someone else, then it's probably not going to be a good outcome. But what we're trying to do is make it a very standardized and approach that a customer can understand and can rely on. But under the covers that we keep away from our customers, that they don't have to worry themselves about, is how do we bring this function to market? And there's so many different pieces. So log collection, and of course, the telemetry from the last slide, how we put custom rule engines in to go to work on that data, whether it's machine learning rounds, whether it's third-party threat intelligence feeds, whether it's our own intelligence feeds that we produce. It's that kind of piece that happens. And it goes hand in hand with research and development. So as a new campaign hits the streets, it's Patch Tuesday. All the exploit kits are getting revisioned up, and they're getting ready to be sold. Well, we have to put new detections into this layer to accommodate that, because the race is on. Ticketing, the workflow integration pieces is its own beast. So we have to be able to make information as relevant and quickly deliver to a customer as possible in the form of tickets. Now, a ticket could be a phone call. It's always documented, but it could be a Zoom call. It could be something that we go into war mode with our customers for, and we work through with them. So what's kind of unique about us is we don't classify incident response as we're just going to scope and contain whatever the threat at that point in time is. We work it through with our customers to say, this endpoint is compromised, this data store is compromised, this is the actions that we need to take to limit the bleeding and get back to work. If a true incident response is someone is coming in the door, someone is taking hard drives out, they're re-imaging, they're doing malware analysis, maybe they're producing documentation if it's insider threats. It's whatever it takes to restore the organization back to a steady state. That's what a classic IR is. But for us, it's guided remediation up until the time it takes someone to come in and start pulling hard drives. Knowledge base to make everything better, the mousetrap. Go ahead, Brian.
Oh, Gary, I would just add to that. I love that you have people represented there. And I think that kind of calls back to your layer 8 thing as well, because it's not simply just forwarding alerts that we're aggregating from all these different places, but that human level of, is this worth waking somebody up for or not? Anecdotally, what we've heard from long-term customers, and Jeremy can speak to this, is if you're getting a phone call from Arctic Wolf at 2 a.m, you're going to have a sinking feeling in your stomach, because it's not ever a good reason for us to be calling you at that time. We understand the nuance on, this is something that can wait until Monday morning as well.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, our people is the connective tissue that makes the service work. Just because this stuff is hard, it really is. Good SOC, good security operations, it's expensive, it's easy to get wrong, it's very time consuming, it's easy to go sideways. So if you can pattern it on sophisticated and mature designs and offer it as a service, it usually produces a much better outcome than if you tried to build one from scratch. Yeah, I'll probably just move on from this particular side. This is the table set, what it is that a SOC brings. And this is where it fits into the real world. So when customers are coming to us, they've usually over leveraged the preventative channel, endpoint, network pieces, anti-DDoS, CASBs, defense in depth, any buzzword that you might want is probably already been bought and consumed. But what never ceases to amaze me is everyone that's ever been breached, it's not because they didn't have an endpoint, and it's not because they didn't have a firewall. Everyone has those things. It's because that these things are so siloed, and the people that deployed them didn't really take into account that it should be an ecosystem. One tool should be able to support and layer into another tool and interlock to make a very tight mortar. And what they were missing is the overarching control over all of these pieces to be able to say, okay, the vendor that made this firewall, they're not concerned with anything else except for their firewall. We want to be able to take the best of what it's producing and match it up with the best of what the endpoint is producing and make the answer known that something has hit this particular network pattern or this particular pattern. To really boil it down, it's what do you do if someone decided to throw a war and you were unwillingly invited? We want to be sure that when that invitation comes, that we're ready. So kind of like the military, everything that we do is built on technology, but also people and process. We want to practice 10 times for every one time that we might see something. Whether it's a firewall or that's a bad email, we want to protect users from doing the regular business things that they should be doing. It shouldn't be out of the question for a user to open up an email attachment. That's a perfect business thing to do. Or maybe not open macros, but maybe so if they're using macros on a day-to-day basis. Systems need to be able to accommodate very simple mistakes like that. But too often the strategy is, oh, we'll just go out of business if someone opens up an email or clicks on a link that they shouldn't have. And the reason why is that they didn't make this jump over to a security operations center. Like I said, it has to have core components and service offerings that it provides, but generally this gap is too far, especially for the mid-range size companies and definitely so for the small side. But even the largest organizations have challenges making this leap. Gartner says a third of companies that try a SOC, large enterprises that try to build a SOC in-house, fail at it. And the reason why is the time to value is very, very long. It takes 18 months, 2 years to be able to get the value that you would want out of a SOC, or at least get it up to the run rate that you are expecting from it. And everything changes probably within the 18 months. So this is where we fit in.
And then
Go ahead.
Gary, with the Arctic Wolf being a log collector, it makes it, it's collecting logs from the firewalls, Active Directory, from all of the endpoints and everything like that, right? And so it makes tracking where something does come into the network. You have all of this correlated right through Arctic Wolf, to where you can find here's this from this log, here's this from this log in AD, here's where this account got changed. And so you can correlate all these logs, and it just makes for great security awareness. Even small incidents that don't end up causing anything, it's the ability to track it from this log to this log to this log to this log across multiple different devices and multiple different platforms. It's really awesome.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeremy. It's building the chain of evidence. Whenever we produce something for a customer that we want them to pay attention to, it's well sourced. It has multiple evidence pieces that feed into it that says, okay, we can track it down to this Mimecast alert that came into an inbox. Maybe it's a retrospective alert versus, hey, we saw maybe a phishing attempt that happened when they landed on a lookalike website, because that comes in from the network layer. And versus, okay, now the user account is doing suspicious things. Maybe there's RDP connections that it's launching, or weird PowerShell, or maybe it's just the time of day is really changed from what this user had been doing up to this point. So the story usually changes. There are common themes that run across every single breach, but not enough where someone can just have ChatGPT look into it, at least not yet. And definitely not in our experience.
I was about to say, isn't the answer all of this AI? Isn't that going to solve all these problems?
Maybe. It doesn't seem like we're there yet, though.
Not yet.
All right. Still just chugging along. So managed detection response is our predominant. And what I want to kind of leave you guys with is we're only scratching the surface of what the capabilities are. What we want you to do is say, that seems interesting, or maybe that seems like it could be a potential fit for us, and reach out to IVOXY and find out more. So we're just going just a little shallow on this, just for the time constraints, and because we don't want to just overload you here on your Tuesday. This particular slide is as complicated as it gets for us, which isn't much because we're not Cisco. It's not all about the nerd knobs. It's all about what the outcome is. And all of this, since we produce it as a service, this is stuff that we hide from our customers that they don't have to take on as a burden. And the first comes with, how do we get the telemetry? I'm just going to load this all out. Our sensor, that's the first one. So network detection response. So what we're able to do with this particular Swiss Army knife is that's what gets all that on-prem telemetry and goodness, all those DNS logs, all the Active Directory login information, all those firewall logs. If it's a classic endpoint, a lot of times there's on-prem servers for those that we connect into. And what it classically will do for us is we're also a managed IDS. I came from Cisco, so I'm a pretty decent snort guy. And what I always saw from every single Firepower customer is that they had tons of IDS events and alerts that came from snort. And it's not their fault that they couldn't track it down, because no one has the kind of time to look into thousands of events that happen every single day. So it's just enough to say, okay, I hope that signature base is good enough, and it's protecting us, and then it's not alerting on things that I should be paying attention to before it's too late. We have that managed IDS capability in our box, and it's full of snort, it's full of suricata, it's full of other third-party feeds that come in. We're the ones that optimize and tune it. We're the ones that are looking at the events as they come through. So it's not a checkbox. Okay, you have to have IDS going into PCI CDEs. We're actively looking at it because that is one of our predominant viewpoints on seeing if there's breach. And there's nothing unusual about this. Pretty much every SIM maker that's out there has network analysis capabilities as part of it. The only difference is a customer has to deploy that themselves, and they're the ones that are tasked with reading the output as it happens. And also in that same vein, a lot of them will have their own particular agent. We have one. It's not a replacement for CrowdStrike. It's not a replacement for Defender ATP or whatever your preference is for an EDR, or even a next-gen AV, or even a classic EPP. We'll work with all of those. What our agent does is it allows the SOC and the triage engineers in the SOC to be able to effectively analyze the endpoints in real time for what's in the process tables, what behaviors are happening in the registry, if there's DLL abuse. It's basically cranks up logging for every single endpoint to the maximum, especially for Windows, if we can get Sysmon running as part of it. So Sysmon is a Windows package that's not enabled by default. And the reason why is it really cranks up the logging. It really sends it to the moon, which we like, because the more information, the better, and the more relevant and quick we can be. That being quick is the name of the game. If you can keep the breach dwell time to as minimum as possible, the recovery is going to be that much easier and cheaper in the long run. So we're not saying that we're gonna prevent things from happening. We just want to be there to catch it, and to catch it quickly. That's the value proposition of a SOC. It's there to take over when everything else goes wrong. And the last piece is all of the integrations that are API forward. So we're making the cloud to cloud connections that pull in all those Okta MFA or Duo MFA or Azure MFA, or we're getting all those EDRs that are cloud native. We're getting the email security channels. We're getting Office 365, so much data from Office 365, because that's where the money is. No surprise there. If there's money to be had, especially if you can trick very powerful people, that's where the payoff really exists. So we watch that Office 365 channel probably the most diligently of any other channel or source that we have. And of course, cloud opens up its own hazards, right? Misconfigurations galore, complexity galore. We want to be there if there's someone that's abusing APIs in AWS, or if they're doing leaky S3 buckets, etc. So someone puts a NAT gateway into a VPC, a lot of times that can cause a big exfiltration that's going out. So we're pretty massive. We're 4,000 plus customers worldwide. We take in trillions of events. I think this number is closer to 2 trillion per week at this point. And that equals petabytes worth of data that we accumulate from all of our customers. When it hits this pipeline, we ingest everything. If you can produce it in a log format, we take it on. We bring parsers. So this is where the intelligence of the state machine take over. So we're going to take that data that's interesting to us, because not all data is, we'll be honest. If it's doesn't have a practical security component, we're not going to prime that data to be able to run it over threat engines, et cetera. We are only looking for those relevant 150, 200 different sources of network detection or endpoint detection or identity to be able to drive it down for deeper analysis. We use all the data, don't get us wrong, but we want to prime specific data because those are the threads that you pull on the mystery to be able to unravel the whole thing. Yeah, we just watched the Knives Out sequel, so I guess I'm kind of in that mindset. All this is buildable. You could build all of this yourself off-the-shelf software. So Splunk can do this. Rapid7 probably can do this. What's a little bit interesting of our approach is we don't make you have to manage it yourself, because the management part is usually where those tools fall down, because it takes a lot of expertise and a lot of ongoing training to be able to operate. So when it hits our platform, this is the people-centric square. This is where they're going to take over. Threat intelligence feeds will winnow that down to just hundreds per week per customer, where a real person is taking over. And you can see there's a hierarchy inside the SOC to be able to do analysts at 1, 2, and engineering positions before our customers are notified with it. So at the final stage is tickets and reports and proactive security posture guidance, but customers really know us from ticketing. So what we're able to do is funnel down trillions of events down to 1 to 2 tickets per week that are highly sourced that our customer needs to work at or look at. And even if it's just enough to say, okay, this is significant, let's work on it now. Or, yeah, we know about that particular vacation home in the south of France. Can we suppress these in the future? We feed that back, and that's part of the ongoing relationship that we have. And I'm going to touch on the security journey one really quick. Come on. All right, the investigation breakdown. I'm going to spend a lot of time on this one. This is just to show that there's no silver bullet. This is the no silver bullet slide. So there's no one specific protection across all of our customers that made up the lion's share of detections or preventions for any of the tickets that we produced. If anything else, it's kind of a multi-way split of the same proportions. Maybe network IDS and the firewall together, that gets you about 40% of the way. But generally, it's going to be a weird login at Active Directory at 5 in the morning, or it's going to be a weird event that came in off of CrowdStrike that kicks off the investigation and it pulls in more telemetry sources. Even our own agent, 10% of the time, our agent is the one that caught it. But that doesn't mean that that's not important. 10% is still a lot in the grand scheme of things. But just to show that when a vendor comes in and says, just buy product X or widget Y and everything will be great, the reality just really doesn't show that. But if you don't have people that are able to analyze every single one of these resources and make the case of, okay, this network IDS is significant and it's backed up by our agent or third-party silence, then the whole architecture is just going to fall apart. Operational approach, people, process, and technology. I'm not going to spend a lot of time just because I'm looking at the clock, but I will on the people side, the quality of people. If you have a job opening that you're looking to fill in the security space, whether it's an analyst or an engineer, I just ask that maybe you consider an alternative, because those people are pretty expensive, let's be honest, and they're pretty fickle sometimes, I'll be honest. I apologize if you're on the call, but I'm the same way, so I feel like I can say that. We're able to provide that at scale, and the reason why is that there are two halves in our approach. The first, and this is the one that really sets us apart from any kind of other MDR cluttered messaging that you might hear, is the strategic nature of our concierge security team. So these are SOC managers. They wear many hats. Security is one of them, but they put it in business framing, meaning that they work your hours, they're in your time zone. They're the ones that attend your meetings. They're the ones that produce your documentation and reports. They're the ones that present that documentation and reports, and they're taskable. So if you say, I have a PCI audit that's coming in, and I need to produce documentation to satisfy the auditor, give it to these guys, because since they're taking the data, they're the ones that can make sense of it in ways that will meet business objectives, like a PCI audit. Or if you wanted to get their perspective on Google Cloud or Carbon Black or something to that effect, they're the ones that are the SOC managers that can either produce it themselves or they can bring in the deep bench that's behind them, because we have hundreds of people worldwide. So we have the expertise on pretty much anything a customer is wanting to build in-house from a security standpoint. The tactical side. So these are the guys that are looking at the triage boards and doing the pivoting and the analyzing in real time as events come in. I know I don't think I mentioned our SLAs. Our SLAs are pretty impressive. You have 30 minutes of dwell time before we can have an action available for you. And what that means is from the minute that something hits our platform, we have 30 minutes to have some sort of response in place, whether it's a containment, whether it's a quarantine, whether it's a notification, whether it's a phone call, whether it's a Zoom. It's whatever the escalation run books say we should do for a particular event. If it's a high priority one, like we've detected ransomware. And here's the thing about ransomware. You typically have about 3 to 5 days of dwell time in the environment before the encryption phase is kicked off in ransomware. Once that encryption phase is kicked off, you have about 2 or 3 minutes before everything is locked up. So they want, before they flip that switch, they want to maximize their blast radius as broadly as they possibly can. All those network shares, any cloud storage that they can grab a hold of, all the endpoints, all the servers, et cetera. So the good news for us is that we have 3 days to uncover that. The bad news is that once they determine that it's go time, then not a whole lot is going to be able to solve you besides good backups and recovery strategies. But we work on those with you as well.
And then
So,
Gary, one thing I really like about this is the only thing that your team does, and you guys got over 4,000 customers of experience where you're looking for things and you're collecting things from all these different other customers of, hey, we're seeing this over here, or we're seeing this over there. You guys aren't patching servers, and you guys aren't doing double duty on other things. This is a dedicated security only team members. And so rather than hiring somebody and then having them also doing double duty of other patching servers and they're building ESX hosts, this is all you do. And so it makes, it brings the level of security up, even from having to hire somebody and then having them do double duty security and being a sysadmin. So that's one of the great things I love about this. So
yeah, we're going to hit the expertise and the guidance piece. But you definitely reminded me of something. I hate buying a car because I do it every 7 years, 10 years. It's just not in my wheelhouse to be able to defend myself and my interests against the sales guy that's trying to sell me the car, because he does probably dozens a day. It's kind of like that in the attacker world too. If you're tasked and responsible for a specific organization, you might only have to do it for real once every few years. Maybe every 5, every 3, or maybe it's tomorrow. You just don't know. It's if you don't have the memory or the expertise or the experience of being able to do it day in and day out, there's going to be a learning curve on the job in real time as it's happening. So that's also one of those other unquantifiable things, that having a service of where they do nothing but this all day long is going to have inherent benefits beyond doing it once yourself every 3 years, 5 years, or whatever it is. All right. I love this particular slide just because it puts in a human face and a story behind the people that are actually doing this work for our customers. I don't know, Brian, do you want to, because you know these people a lot better than me. You go and bring them whiskey.
That's true. I would say I get pulled into a lot of comparisons where folks will say, hey, we have decided that we can't do SOC in-house, and we are looking to look outside for help with this. Can you compare Arctic Wolf to someone else who's also doing SOC? And one of the things I'll do is just go to their careers pages and see who's hiring. If you see that they're pretty much, as Gary mentioned, hiring all aggressive salespeople, they're probably reselling a product. If they're hiring support and developers, they're probably creating a product. If they're hiring true analysts, that's pretty rare. And when you do find that, the biggest problem is retention. When you hire an analyst and keeping a cybersecurity professional in a specific role in IT, there's already a lot of churn, but cybersecurity is just insane. So our CTO 10 years ago really spotted that there was going to be some issues with both recruitment as well as retention. And it's all personnel based, this isn't code based. So instead of opening our SOC, say in the middle of downtown Seattle or Bellevue, we instead put them next to interesting military bases and universities for recruitment pipeline. So think Utah and Texas, et cetera. So this allows us to recruit and retrain and train some incredible talent. And the other thing we wanted to do to make Arctic Wolf very different is we understood that just firing tickets off to a customer, even if those were really accurate tickets, weren't going to be a successful approach long-term. As Gary mentioned a while ago, we need to integrate in the customer site in formal terms of sitting in on meetings and understanding you guys are decommissioning this location, or there's a new site coming online, and these are the important things to know. So to solve all of those things, we have what we call the concierge security team. And in our company, that is the apex of our organization. So if you join Arctic Wolf as an analyst, you have many paths forward. You can go into R&D, you can go into development. There's multiple things that you can look into to see how interested you are. However, if you're able to do all of those things, achieve SAN certification, CISSP certification, et cetera, and you have people skills. You have the capability, and I say that because sometimes these folks do end up having to present to boards or have to talk to CEOs and that type of thing. So these folks you get unrestricted access to, meaning in an informal sense. Yeah, we've got the 24/7 ticketing down. Gary mentioned our awesome SLAs. We knock that out all day. What is great about these folks is in the casual engagement model, security journey side of things, you can shoot them a Slack message. Hey, wait, I just got pinged from LastPass on this. Have you guys heard of this? Or, whatever it is that you've got a question on, or we have an audit coming up. I want you to help me start collecting evidence and that stuff for the auditor that we need. Or we're going to do a pen test. We want to try to catch you guys sleeping, or we want your help organizing the pen test. There's so many different things that come up on a day-to-day basis that you can really start looking at these folks as an extension of your team. So when you start Arctic Wolf Services, not only are you getting the 24/7 SOC operation, the triage teams and everything that we've talked about, more importantly, then for your day-to-day life, you'll get to interact with these folks. And we think that's really the thing that sets us apart.
Yeah, and a great example of the above and beyond that they go for. If there's some huge mega event that's eating up the news sources of the day, Log4j really comes to mind. Hafnium comes to mind. The SolarWinds breach that comes to mind. These guys, they phone up their customers. So the Log4j is an obvious one. Since we already have manifests of applications that are installed in endpoints, we can determine if, hey, someone is very susceptible to Log4j. We'll call them up with a plan that says, hey, did you know about this? This is where we know it is, but it's probably in other places. This is the plan that we should do to make this work, go away for us. And then we did it again a few days later, because if Log4j comes out, they rush a patch out, but patch isn't right, or there's more vulnerabilities that are surfaced in the meantime, because now more people are looking at it. We do this all day long for vulnerabilities. And there's been some very high critical ones, especially in the networking space of late. SonicWall, Fortinet, and maybe WatchGuard too. They all had very high CVSS scored CVEs that were remote executable. So we want to make sure that our customers are on top of that with the expert guidance. All right. Oh yeah, I like this one. So we're not just there for you in wartime, we're there for you in peacetime. And it's pretty self-serving on our standpoint, because if we can enhance our customers' security posture, it makes our job that much easier and cheaper for us to be able to provide and perform. So if a customer doesn't have the sophisticated preventative tooling, or they're misconfigured, or there's open vulnerabilities, it makes us chasing things on the back end a lot harder to do. So that's part of the security journey. We call these spiders, security posture in-depth reviews. And we put our customers on a plan that says, hey, for this particular 90 days, we want to make sure that we have the service tuned for you. We want to make sure everything's healthy. We want to, get your goals. We want to be able to find out what reports it is that you're most interested in and how we can fine tune those for your consumption. That's the first 90 days. But then after that, there's quarterly. So let's look and see what kind of ports that you have open available to the internet. I like that one because generally people will put a firewall out and they're troubleshooting it at 3 a.m. and they put a permit IP any rule that's in there, and they go to bed and they forget all about it because it's a wash in a 10,000 rule base. But if you have someone that's scanning that from external, hackers are doing it already. It's a turkey shoot, right? It's on the internet. But we're the ones that can come back and say, yeah, it looks like you're running a lot of open ports to the internet. Some of these are maybe RDP servers or VDI servers or et cetera. Let's talk about those because that's a risk, and we want to be able to lessen the occurrence of an incident happening. Or we'll shake out your Office 365 configuration. There's so much ability to harden an environment using the tools that you already have and own. It usually comes down to expertise or time. You just don't have the time to be able to do it. And it's advantageous just to have pointers to say, this is what's important right now versus what we should do this next quarter. Let's see what else is kind of interesting out of this. Ransomware stuff, we do things for storage. So we'll look and see what your backup strategies are and give some recommendations on how to get that a little bit better. GPO will look at your rule base for your firewalls, but we'll also look and make recommendations around GPO just to harden Active Directory for our customers. And then the detour I like. So we'll detour if there's something that's immediate. We'll take the LastPass because we were talking about it earlier. Let's say an organization uses LastPass. We know it because it's part of the stack. We understand it. We will tell our customer that, hey, let's look at MFA, or maybe we should look at hardening the master vault passwords for all the users to make sure the password policy is at suitable complexity and strength. So that's the detour side. I like that one. All right, kind of moving right along. Just kind of give an example of the breadth and depth that we provide for our customers and how this is different than just looking at an interface for a firewall manager or a EDR console and try to work an event from there. Try to match it up to what it is your experience has been for a point product or a point solution, and try to spill it over to another tool. In this particular case, it's email compromise. It's the hot newness, right? If someone reuses a password in unrelated third service, it's usually it's at risk from that standpoint, and it's very simple for a customer to say, I wonder if that same password will work for their corporate email Office 365 environment. So that's what this one is. The first is at 1 o'clock, attacker leveraged stolen credentials. We don't even care at this point how they were stolen. That's for cleanup actions after the fact. This is just, we want to catch and kill in the environment. This user was pretty sophisticated. They used Duo, but then they got bombed. That's the new hotness today. That MFA fatigue is people, if it doesn't get them the first time, if you just bombard them for a good hour, they'll just give up and say, this thing must be broken, accept, and go away. And that's what happened in this particular case, that an attacker used Duo and got the victim to accept the push. And then they were able to get into the mailbox. Active Sync, so it must have been a mobile device. Duo reports in, hey, user successfully logged in. Nothing untoward about that. That's the way it's supposed to work. Duo authenticates people, and then they get into the resources that they requested. What happens next is a little bit more interesting. First thing the does is go into the calendar and they start updating it with maybe unrelated third-party email addresses. And they put in suspicious mail forwarding and deletion rules. This is classic. This usually means that a wire transfer fraud is imminent. That they're going to go into Office 365 and say, okay, I'm going to cover my tracks. And if someone sends an inbox to my victim or an email to my victim, I'm going to delete it so they never even see it coming in. Usually the email is going to be something along the lines are you sure you want us to send all of these gift cards out? Office 365 chimes in at this point. And we escalate it because Office 365 is saying, yeah, there's rules that are looks like are untoward for this user. They're doing deletions, they're doing forwards out of the organization, et cetera. We begin our activity or our triaging at 118. So usually it's looking at events that preceded it or maybe some parallel events that are happening in combination to be able to determine, hey, is this just email compromise or is there some other malfeasance going on? Attacker uploads phishing PDFs to OneDrive with the intent to distribute. That makes sense, right? So we've got malware laden PDF. We put it in the corporate OneDrive because we're part of the corporation at this point, and we started to distribute it through email invites to calendar appointees that say, hey, grab this new PDF. It's everyone that's out. And at that point, no one should be blamed for pulling down a PDF. Everything is fine. It comes from OneDrive, which we use. It comes from a person that we trust. There's no real reason why someone shouldn't grab this PDF and go to town with it. So that's when we say, hey, customer, there's something wrong. We recommend that we boot this user, we start resetting passwords, and we start doing a deeper threat hunt to see what might still be out there, like this PDF that's in OneDrive, or maybe something that's on the local endpoint. Okay, I'll just jump ahead. What I'm really trying to denote with this is that there were several sources of telemetry that went into this story. Duo MFA logs, Office 365 logs, probably an anti-malware piece that looked at the PDF for OneDrive. But beyond all of that, we rapidly worked within, 40 minutes here to get this in front of the customer with remediation steps. And then of course the day two operation of, okay, how do we make this better? How do we train the user so that they don't reuse passwords? Or let's do some geofencing in Duo. There's a lot of day two operations and guidance that we provide. I'm just going to skip over this in the interest of time. This is another useful, what we call customer case that happened. This one has combinations of Sentinel-1, I think, and definitely our sensor, Active Directory, of course, etc. In the day two journey of, okay, how do we harden to make sure we don't fight the same war again? Geofencing, MFA, let's tweak and tune GPO. GPO and PowerShell are such easy wins for an organization to lock down. We provide that as part of our security guidance of saying, okay, let's look at the GPOs to see if there's something that we can do from a programmatic standpoint. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to get into a demo, but please reach out to IVOXY to get one scheduled, just because I don't want to give it short attention by looking at the clock here. I want to be respectful for everyone's time. So next one up, manage risk. So what is manage risk and what does that mean for us? Managed risk is we want to enumerate and have a plan in place to deal with vulnerabilities and misconfigurations on-prem and in the cloud. From a generic standpoint, if you look at that IBM data breach report that they just put out, misconfigurations and vulnerabilities are the third leading source of attack, whether in frequency or damage in dollars. And these are easy wins, right? These are already things that we own. If we can get ahead of this, we narrowed the swim lane that an attacker needs to fit in to successfully achieve their objective. It's really just attack surface management. If we can shrink that attack surface down, we make them work that much harder. And ideally, we'll make them not be interested. Maybe they'll go attack someone that's not quite as with it. Or if we make it too onerous and expensive on their front, then they won't bother. That's the only way that you can really truly price out good security, is not in your cost, but in the attacker's costs. If you make their costs go up, then they're going to steer clear. It's just simply economics. So where does this fit in our bubble? It's the second service that we deliver, manage risk and then cloud. Those are the two combinations. If you don't use public cloud, then you don't need that one. And how this is going to be different from the classic vulnerability tooling that's out there, whether it's Tenable, Qualys, you name it, is that we provide it as a managed offering. So you don't have to staff it with people that are looking at a dashboard or a tool and trying to do their asset classifications and trying to match up the amount of risk for this particular endpoint or data store in the environment. We're providing all of that as part of the service. So if you have a Tenable but no one's watching it, you're a perfect customer or a good fit for us. Or if you don't have any kind of risk management piece in place now, we're also for the same reason.
Yeah, I'd say, Gary, that's probably the way that it organically evolved, if that's the right phrase to use there, was because folks were used to working with the concierge team, like you talked about before. Hey, let's do a deep dive on GPO policies. Let's look at this. They're already up to their elbows, if you will, in the configuration of your environment. What was happening is customers were taking the outputs of their Nessus scans, the results from their pen tests, and handing those to the concierge team and saying, make a patch management strategy for me. Help me prioritize. Like, yeah, Tenable says this is a 10 out of 10, but is it? Like, we just changed my GPO policies. So what does that mean to me? And so having, there wasn't a need for another scanner out there. We didn't see a need for that. What we did see was a need for the conversation of being and someone doing, as you mentioned, that scan work and building those lists for the customers.
No, thanks for the insights and the origins. I don't think I ever heard the origin story of why this actually came about as an offering. It makes nothing but sense because most SOCs today, they're tasked with managing vulnerabilities. And we provide that too. And just so everyone is clear, we're completely a la carte. So we can bundle services for you, but we also give you the flexibility to mix and match whatever it is that you need for your organization. So if you told us, hey, we have a good management platform in place, that's fine. We can just look at managed detection and response or a combination of the two. So, and that's classic SOC. A SOC is tasked with a specific set of services, and sometimes vulnerability isn't even part of their wheelhouse. It might be the desktop team, et cetera. So we're kind of mimicking that. And hopefully everyone has a pretty good understanding of what we mean by managed risk. It's vulnerabilities, and it's misconfigurations, and how it is that we stay on top of that. And it's also got some other neat things in there too, like account takeover risk. And what that means is we prowl the dark web. We're looking to see if someone is trying to resell credentials that are associated with your organization. And if they are, we let you know it. We'll let you know if it's known what the original source of the third-party breach was. And we'll let you know what's being sold, if it's usernames, if it's passwords, if the passwords are encrypted or plain text, so we can give you honest assessments of how risky this is. And generally, it'll lead to one of two paths. The first is the user is going to have to change passwords, and the second is he's going to have to be educated not to do that in the future. So the quicker we can catch that, the better everything is. And this also goes into, in the NIST framework standards, everything we do is, for the most part, detect, respond, and recover in MDR. But now we're shifting to something more preventative or prescriptive on the front end to be able to mitigate the likelihood that a breach will even occur in the first place. So it's a few different pieces. We do network-based vulnerability assessments inside the environment, outside the environment, and we do endpoint assessments too, because I mentioned our agent from before. It's the exact same agent. It's the same one that's going in and making manifest lists of all the applications that are installed and their versions, and we're matching it up to what's at risk, whether it's a browser, an operating system, office software, it doesn't really matter. We're the ones that are determining that. And like Brian said, it's the exact same concierge team. So we don't give you team over here and a team over there. It's the one and only team. So since they already know your environment and they know you and your objectives, they're also the same ones that are producing the risk reports that say, this is the things that we need to really tackle right now. No one is ever going to be able to minimize the vulnerability side of the ledger. Yeah, I'll just skip ahead. But what we can do is put it in context. So whenever there's a huge earth-shattering list of vulnerabilities, OpenSSL for Heartbleed, or they've had a few others since then, whenever that happens, it creates a huge mountain of risk in the environment. And the only thing that we can do is whittle it down to maybe just a valley of risk. But you can never remove it outright, because as soon as you get it down to a manageable figure, that's when there's going to be a whole new thing that you have to tackle. And you oscillate between peaks and valleys. And that's what risk has always done. So these are all the things that we take over for our customers so that they don't have to deal with. It's really just making a plan. If I was going to highlight one, it would be a plan around how it is that we're able to keep the organization safe from a vulnerability and misconfiguration standpoint. All the other ones just kind of feed up into what it is that we should do and when we should do it. So I'll just leave that there. If you have a tool that you like, that's great. We'll work with the information that it produces. But if you don't have something in place for that, come talk to us, please. All right. So I'm not going to really get into the demo of this one too, because I'm looking at the clock. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And I'm sure that there's going to be some goodies for all of you attendees that attended, including one really big one. So I want to thank you again for joining in and lasting with us for this. So Managed Risk Dashboard, this is, customers have access to it, but the level of access that they want is completely up to them. If you want to really get into it, you can. But the whole point of having a managed service is that we're the ones that produce the service, the outcomes for you. And usually what that means is, okay, how risky are we now? How risky are we over time? And how can we pinpoint risk, whether it's in an asset classification like the PCI servers or critical infrastructure like DNS, the vulnerabilities that are scored and tagged with those classifications. We're the ones that say, okay, these are the ones that we need to attack here and now. And of course, the heat map. Each one of these is an endpoint, and it shows severity-wise how many vulnerabilities or misconfigurations are affecting them in terms of number and CVS scoring, et cetera, just so it can kind of focus us where we need to plan ahead. And so in the interest of time, I won't show the management plan, but basically it carves up the environment for a specific asset classification or a specific location or whatever the prioritization has been defined prior to the vulnerabilities rolling in is where we focus our efforts, whether it's in the New York office or the Bellevue office, or it's in the domain controllers classification, or it's into the terminals that are out at our large infrastructure. That's what the planning is. So we make our recommendations on how we get that right. And build all that out. All right, and of course, reports. We produce a lot of reports for our customers to be able to leverage, whether it's for improving the environment or tracking how successful the engagement has been. And so we should see those high vulnerabilities going down over time. That's the trending report. Or if we need to produce evidence to leadership that says, this is what we found and this is what we're doing about it. Reports are usually the main mechanism that we're able to relay that information. But it's not just like a firewall will produce a report. We work it through with you. So if you need help understanding the report, or if you need a readout of the report, that's also part of what the concierge team provides to our customers. So it's not just a fire and forget and they're on to something else. No, they stay with it. Quarterly reports. No time for a demo. And I'll move on to our newest and arguably one of the most compelling ones in our offering bucket, and that is, how do we train our users so that they slow down and think about things before they let muscle memory take over? And that is in the trend of the human element. So human element involved in 95% of breaches, and the reason why is it's the path of least resistance. Attackers don't want to, they don't have 0 days, at least the typical ones. And no one wants to play an ace if you can just play a 2, because if that does the job, then that makes the friction a lot less to scoring their objective, whether it's stealing money or trade secrets or embarrassing the organization, et cetera. And you can see in the tune here, there's some trickery that goes into predominantly all of the breaches that we're having to compensate for. So we have managed security and awareness and compliance content pack. How we're a little different than a classic organization that creates a vast library and they leave it up to the customer to pick the content from the library, deliver the content, score it as it comes back, is we take all of that away for them. We shoot our content, we make sure it's relevant to the security threats of the specific day. Around Christmas, it was all around holiday travel at airports, whether it's risky Wi-Fi connections, whether it's screen protection from shoulder surfers, and it's still always USB drives. It's always a big one, but also not letting their guard down, because everyone's already in holiday mood at that point. So their guard is just naturally down a little bit. So if we can just give them a little spike at that point in time, maybe we can save people a lot of damage. So that's where we're going to be different than the email security providers. A lot of them will do phishing tests, or Office 365 has some of that. So we're a combination of phishing tests and scoring and coaching if there's a failure there, quizzes and micro learnings, which I really like. I'm going to just get to that piece that I like. The whole service is predicated on one thing: is people don't like to learn unless it's something they're interested in. And if you're doing a training program where they're only paying attention for a 30-minute session twice a year, or a yearly 60-minute one, that's not really going to be conducive to a good outcome. It's the same as if you're trying to teach your child how to play the piano. You won't just give them one 60-minute lesson once a year. Nothing's going to really fly with that. The Ebbinghaus guy that came up with this, what he figured out earlier on is that if you immediately after learning something, it just precipitously falls off the map. So it's like it never happened. So after 4 weeks of learning something where they had a really good understanding of it, within 4 weeks, they're down to maybe 20%. So that's not a great return. And that's also true for security learning. So our model is a little bit different, where it's not a huge session that gets hit all at once. It's a little tiny dose that brings it back up. And then when it starts to fall off again, we do another 3-minute or 4 or 5-minute training. And what's different about a managed offering versus you have to go it alone is we're the ones that are scoring that on our customers' behalf. So we can come to you and say, okay, here's your security conscience score, and these are the people that are dragging it down. And oh, by the way, we know these personalities and their placements in the environment. So if they get tricked for real, it could be really expensive to overcome. And very damaging to overcome if this particular band, because everyone has talked to leadership before, they think that they're infallible and they're above it. We kind of overcome that by a few things. The first is we keep the sessions very small and approachable, but also we keep it very entertaining. So while it is 2 or 3 minutes, it's engaging enough that people will want to do it. I hear from a lot of our customers that the training is humorous, and a lot of times they'll watch it more than once. I personally watch the British English version one, but I know of people that watch that one and the regular American English one, just because it's, kind of funny. So that's the value proposition of, if you can just manage small doses and increments of security awareness, the effect is astounding.
There's something kind of counterintuitive happening with this as well. Yeah. Getting time in front of employees is always an issue, especially if unions are involved in that type of thing. So it comes up frequently. Yes, we have to give our users this amount of training per year. Won't doing it this way require more training and fighting an even harder battle against those resources? And no, it's we did the math. You can actually touch the users with this, as Gary mentioned, like a 2-minute little funny video, and just do that a couple times throughout the year and have better engagement and better scoring than making them cram it all into a couple hours at the end of the year. You actually end up spending less time when you break it up throughout the year as well. So you get some of your time back. Counterintuitive to train more frequently, less, but it ends up working out rather well.
Yeah, I love that. I love it because the psychology of phishing and tricking people is interesting on its own, but also how we can help them by using psychology. I kind of liken it to when the phishing test would first come out, people would flunk it and then they would get a beat down for it. Their bosses or management or the InfoSec department would come to them and be like, "Can you believe that you did this? You could have killed our organization." And that's not going to be conducive for the real world, because it's going to make them resentful, and you can't really teach that way. My kid that just had her yearly piano lesson, she's coming back and I'm teaching her to ride a bike. When she messes up, I'm not going to just push her to the ground and be like, "See what you just did there? That's terrible. You're never going to learn to ride a bike at this pace." But if you do gentle coaching, you can make them part of the security strategy, and that protects everyone instead of just making them feel ashamed. So that's the approach that we're taking, that we want to bring them along and make them part of our security strategy instead of an obstacle to it.
Especially if it's in some small doses. Anything longer than 5 to 10 minutes on one of these things, it's not like it's really fun content. Hey, it's security, network security, and everything else stuff. So if you can keep it short, that's great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's what we're predicated on. Okay, micro learning, like I mentioned, we shoot all of our content, and we're the ones that are scoring it. So we can come back and say, this is where we need more direct touch, perhaps, in a problem classification of user, or everything is great. Everything looks great. Demo again for time, because I'm down to my last 10 minutes. I'll probably just mention the predictable pricing, because everyone always says, "Okay, sounds great. What for budgetary reasons? Tell me what it is that you guys cost." And we're really proud of our model, which is it's predictable. classically, any kind of log ingestion organizations, they're going to price on the total number of endpoints, which a lot of people will underestimate by about 20%, or they're going to be asked to provide, okay, how much volumetric data are you going to send to me, or how many events per second, basically unknowing factors that no one really can guess at until they turn it up. And that leads to very unpleasant business decisions down the line, meaning, oh, we didn't know we were going to produce that much data. Okay, let's just limit our scoping to the firewall or the endpoint, and we'll just ignore identity or network analysis or you name it. They really have to be selective just to make it pencil out for the log ingestion. So we make it a lot simpler and predictable, as you can see, that if you tell us you have this many servers and this many users, this is what your price is. Generally, everything has a knowledge worker component, which is what's kind of illustrated there at the bottom across all of our services. All right, can we get rid of that? Oops. But the number of servers is applicable to risk and detection. So, but these are all things that people should be able to easily get their figures around. How many Windows and Linux servers they have in the environment. Should be easy if you have an EDR, because the EDR will tell you what they're all installed on. And of course, everyone knows the employees, or at least has some reasonable assumption of what the employee counts are. So just wanted to throw that out. Very, very simple to get an accurate quote. All right, incident response. And this is perfect for my last 8 minutes, which hopefully I won't be able to use the whole 8. Maybe I can do another 5, and then we can talk about prices. Seems like a good use of time. And of course, if you have questions, you throw them in. I haven't had the time to look at them, but we will get back to you if they aren't getting back to you in real time. So incident response. We just recently come out with incident response. It was predicated on us buying an IR organization that did nothing but work with insurance companies. Basically, the flow is you have cyber insurance, you have an incident, the cyber insurer says, okay, we're going to cover that. Here's your list of vendors that you need to be talking to. There's delays and friction there, which is never great, but at least it's a path forward. We bought a company that's on that list. They didn't traditionally do IR retainers, and to be clear, a retainer is having someone on standby. Traditionally, someone will pay as a retainer, like a law firm, to just have someone on standby if they need them. And then if the hours aren't used, then they have to burn them at the end of the year. No one likes that because it's spendy, and at the end of the year, everyone else is doing the same thing. They want to burn down the hours that they prepaid for. So there's going to be delays that way. But again, no one wants to go through it if they don't have to do those tabletop exercises. They'd rather just have an IR retainer that they don't have to spend a large amount of money every single year just to have on standby. So we studied this market. And these are the problems that we found, or challenges that we found with this particular model. Whether it's the Mandiant model or CrowdStrike or you name it, they all do something very significant, which is, hey, you buy your hours up front. And that's what it's going to take for us to be able to answer your call in a timely manner. So no one likes that. So that's usually a 30 grand charge, 50 grand, 70 grand charge every single year just to get this bucket. And then at the end of the year, when you haven't used it, then that's when you do the mad rush to beat the clock. And then there's no planning assistance as part of that. So if you don't have the incident or pay more upfront, then you don't have the what if scenarios already mapped out when it comes time to use it. So we looked at that and we decided, hey, we're not going to do that. We want to give them a 1 hour SLA. There's a guaranteed rate on IR hours, because even though you're paying the retainer, that's usually only a taste or a fraction of what it's going to take to get the IR completed. And after that, you're just going to have to pay a very, very steep rate. The next one is they want to know their IR team. So that's one of the reasons that we want to do that pre-incident guidance that says, okay, this is where your team will be. This is their contact info, et cetera, just so that they can kind of get a lay of the land of the organization before they have to come in and save it. And the customers want to be prepared. So, like I said, the big thing, no prepaid hours. So we do a retainer that says, hey, if you're a customer of ours, we're going to give you a 1 hour SLA. You're not going to have to pay for that. If there is an incident that we need to take care of, it's going to be a very low rate. And as part of it, we give you a scoping call that's for free. So we'll tell you what it would reasonably take to get out from underneath this problem. But the big part is this SLA, knowing who to call and know that you're going to have someone very rapidly instead of having to shuffle over here or talk to the insurance company or see what matches up and maybe keep you from having to Google around to see if this is a good company or not. So,
Well,
like I
another
mentioned,
thing with that is you already know their network. You
yes,
know that's huge. You're already in. You know, it's not like they're going to have to tell you the IP addresses of all their domain controllers and here's all of our logs, right? We already have it. So, yeah, I just wanted to make sure to add that to it. That's a big part of just
absolutely.
learning the network.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to account for logistics like that, but they make the difference. They really do. If you can smooth out that process going into it, it'll make everything a lot smoother. Yep, I think I pretty much hit on everything on this particular slide, the complimentary incident scoping call. So we'll talk to you to find out what it is and give you a reasonable expectation of what the hourly cleanup would look like. And those are favorable versus the competition. Their hourly rates are going to be a lot more than ours. And of course, that the IR planning and review, how we get to know your environment and those logistics that we just talked about. Thanks, Jeremy. And I already hit that one. So it makes nothing but business sense, and it can really help for other things like satisfying executive leadership objectives, or the cyber insurance premium renewal, or finding the security architectural framework that you're trying to align to. Usually has an IR retainer piece of it. So I'm going to skip over that just to kind of show what's a little different from an MDR versus an IR engagement. Basically is the MDR is we're going to put the fire out. The IR is we're going to rebuild the house. So that's generally what it is. That's the delineation between the two at a very high level. So the MDR is there might be problems after we put the fire out, but the IR is the one that restores that business continuity. And service warranty, perfect. Oh yeah, I would just hit on this. So we believe in ourselves so much that for our customers that are customers of ours, we give up to $1 million of operational money if there is some problem that goes wrong with the service. If a customer is breached, we give up to $1 million to get them back on track. I mean, it's got to be used in specific buckets. Ransomware and BEC, we give up to 200,000 out of that 1 million. So that would be ransomware payments, perhaps. Same thing for cyber legal, et cetera. But just it's a nice little sweetener, I guess you should say. It's not paid. It's not something a customer has to pay for because they're already a customer, and it doesn't take the place of cyber insurance. It is a supplemental policy to an insurance play. So take that for what it's worth. I think it's pretty compelling, and it's a nice to have that a lot of other MDRs are not doing. So kind of want to throw that out. Perfect timing. 2 minutes of. Hopefully it's been informative, entertaining, perhaps. I know that. Thank you again to IVOXY, especially you, Jeremy. We have a lot of fun together. I'm glad that you were able to keep us on track.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so, just in the interest of time, we already did the drawing for the solo stove, and Eric Wilninski, and I hope I said your name right. You won the solo stove, so that's pretty awesome. And I think that they should be still sending out some $25 gift cards for DoorDash, I believe. I think that's what it was. And
yeah, I think so. Antonio's the
yeah.
one that came up with it, but yeah, we definitely want to thank you guys for your time. And unfortunately, I couldn't get to the demo portions for the 3, but reach out to your IVOXY rep or your engineer, and let's drive into that too. If you saw something that you like and you wanted to explore.
Yeah, and I believe Tyler and Trace and Doug are all on this webinar. So I mean, feel free to reach out to them afterwards, and we can set up some time. Yeah, it's a great product, and we love it. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy, and congratulations again, Eric. on your solo stove. And I guess with that, maybe we can call it a day.
Yeah, unless anybody has any questions they want to throw in the Q&A, or we can
Mhm.
we can turn on somebody's mic if they want. But again, we're right up at 11:30, so I just want to be conscious of people's time.